Ladies and gentlemen, Pluribus Season 1 has officially wrapped up, and before we even get into it, yes, it's Christmas. Merry Christmas. I'm filming this at 12 in the morning. My parents went to midnight mass because I'm home for the holidays, so I'm sitting in the living room, and yeah, I don't know why I didn't go to mass. I was tired, whatever, it doesn't matter. In this video, I decided to talk about my thoughts on Pluribus Season 1. Because all in all, even though I would say this season was one of my favorite seasons of TV, and I genuinely do mean that. I'm not saying that to ride the Vince Gilligan wave or simp over anything that he makes or glaze it or whatever. I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm actually genuinely serious when I say that I thoroughly enjoyed this show. And it was one of my favorite seasons of TV, but not for one of those reasons that I think are very clear in the same way. On paper, there's a lot of things that I think were idiosyncratic about this season that we're going to talk about in this video. So it's certainly not all sunshine and rainbows, even though, like I said in the beginning, this is one of my favorite seasons of TV. There's a lot I enjoyed about it. In this video, I'm going to focus on the things that I didn't that much, and we're going to talk about it all, but I think I want to put more of an emphasis on just something I've been feeling about the show as it is. I think objectively and conceptually, this is a very, very strong show that packs a very, very significant punch. The idea on paper of there being this apocalypse that takes over the human race that doesn't kill anyone, but it kills their soul, in a sense, and makes everyone a hive mind where they're all actually happy instead of zombies or instead of infected with something or dead, you know what I mean? Instead of that, they're just happy people who are all sunk up. And it's a very interesting premise because it comes at a time where AI is so prevalent. I use AI all the time. I actually used it to help me build an app that I published to the App Store recently. And it's very interesting that this kind of open access is explored in that way, because for the remaining survivors, the 12, 13 people who survived and didn't get affected by the joining, they basically have unlimited world resources and unlimited knowledge. And right now, even though it's faulty, AI is pretty similar in the knowledge department, where we could just ask a simple question to Claude or ChatGPT and get an answer of any kind. And obviously, again, it's not always accurate, but it's just an interesting play on what's actually happening in reality and how there's good to it, there's also bad to it. This obviously takes that conceptually like 10 steps further with the idea of it taking over the world and it not being a good thing, but also being a good thing. And just where that goes is really interesting. So I would say for the premise alone, I don't know how original it is, but for the premise itself, this is like an easy 10 out of 10. I would even go further. This is like 100 out of 10 as far as the concept goes. The problem with this season was in the execution for me. And again, we're going to talk about the negatives here. I don't think this was a bad season of TV. I thoroughly enjoyed it. That being said, I can see how there are people out there, and frankly, I can see how there's a ton of people out there who this did not resonate with in any which way, shape, or form. And honestly, I think it's because they had this very, very strong concept on paper. Again, really cool idea, opens a lot of doors to a lot of questions, it makes you think, and that's the pro. This show made me think more than I think any other show out there. Where it fell apart, though, is in its execution of that story. And the weird thing is, I don't think that that is a fault of the writers in the writer's room, because they actually did a fantastic job of writing each episode. From a script perspective, they were great scripts. The problem is more or less in how it was broken down before they started writing those scripts. Do you know what I mean by that? What I'm essentially getting at is it wasn't in the typewriter, not really the typewriter, it wasn't on the screenplay that was the problem. It was in the broader concept of where the season was going to go. And I wouldn't say how it was directed, but just narratively what they did with this premise this season, that's the problem. Because, again, there's a difference to me between a slow burn and a story that is clearly lacking something that nourishes that story that you have. And again, I keep going back to, I think a lot of this season was set up for a bigger premise to come. You saw that with other Vince Gilligan shows, like you saw it with Breaking Bad, you saw it with Better Call Saul. Those two shows, I think everyone would agree, are at their weakest in the first season. Some people love Better Call Saul season 1. I wasn't one of them. I mean, I did like it, but it would rank low on my list. And I have a feeling, in the grand scheme of things, Pluribus is going to go down that same path. And I think that's also because it still has to find its footing. It still needs to find its pocket in the universe and really justify its existence. I think that takes a little bit of time to do. But it's not even really that's the problem. The problem is they have this concept, but right now there wasn't any variety. So you had Ray Seahorn as Carol, you had Zosha, and you had Manusos. Then you had Diabate, and you had I forget Lakshmi. You had those two characters. Outside of them, mainly Lakshmi and Diabate are the ones that I'm talking about. But there was just no variety, at least for a little bit. The premise came out so strong, and I think this is where I'm going to get to the variety part in a second. The show came out swinging. It put its fucking dick on the table instantaneously with that incredible premise in episode 1. I would say episode 1 is one of my all-time favorite episodes of TV. That was a very, very strong pilot. It was instantly a hook. Like, as soon as you watch it, it was like, I'm in. For whatever happens, I'm in. And then the second episode followed suit with still exploring this, though I started to notice the cracks kind of appear in that regard in that episode, because it went from a bang, a big bang, to just, okay, now we're really just gonna like chill out, which is fine. Again, that goes back to slow burn. I think that's fine. But the problem is then thereafter, that was like it. After the second episode, with seeing all the other survivors like Lakshmi, her group of people, the other survivors and all that stuff, when we go back home and nothing happens for, I think, 3 episodes, it was just like, it's more or less like you have this big grand idea, you came out swinging, and now the brakes are fully pumped when you should really be laying down the groundwork for this story. And I think that's what threw a lot of people for a spin. Again, I'm okay with it because I did enjoy it. I still liked all of this season, except for 1 episode. I still liked all of this season, but it's a very weird juggling act to do with general audiences, to go from a big premise explored in a big way to a complete screeching halt. And I think that's where the show ended up getting very divisive. Honestly, I do like it, but when I go back to the variety part, and this is where I'm talking about screeching on the brakes, when I go back to the variety part, who do we have? We have Zosha, we have Carol, and we have Manusos. But Manusos didn't really become a thing in the story for I don't even know, I think it was 4 episodes, 5 episodes maybe, until we saw him, which is really interesting because for the most part, this season just felt like a way more boring Castaway. Does that make any sense to you? And again, I'm not saying I disliked it. I'm really not. I'm genuinely, it's so hard to talk about this because I loved this season, but I can acknowledge that these are problems that I think they do need to fix for the rest of the show. Because when you're focusing on Carol for so long, and it's the same just long drawn-out shots, which are gorgeous scenery shots, some good music in the background with some good montages, but it's not doing anything. I think that's where the problem is. And I don't think after episode 2, it really reignited much of a spark. Now, that being said, I loved the episode where she has a grenade. That was episode, I think, 3, where she has a grenade, it goes off, Zosha throws it away, but she gets injured. I loved that episode. I thought it was fantastic. I love the episode after where they have Zosha being drugged, and they all say, like, please, Carol, please, Carol. I really liked that. It was just, it never really hit that same intrigue in the way that the first episode did, but it did in a different way, and that's why I loved it. I made this comparison in my episode 9 review. This season of TV was kind of like reading a book. I'm not a big reader, so I don't really enjoy that medium. This show felt more like that, but it was like reading a good book, because it was like kind of a chore. I hope you understand where I'm going with this. As a non-book reader, it's kind of a chore, but if a really good book came along, I would stick through that chore just to read that book. And I still wouldn't enjoy that chore, but I would enjoy the book. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't remember, I read Jaws by Peter Benchley years ago, and I fucking hated reading, but I loved reading that book. Does that make any sense? Like, that's how I felt a lot about this season, and I can't say that I've ever really felt that way about a TV show. In some ways, Succession had elements to that, but it wasn't the same. This one, at its slowest points, it did feel like a chore, but during that chore, I was actually like glued to the TV, like watching more than I think I've ever watched any TV show. And I actually think that's attributed to the writing. So this is why it's such a confusing thought, because on one hand, that is an idiosyncrasy of a story. It shouldn't really do that, but the writers executed that in a way that intrigued me, that caused me to say this is one of my favorite seasons of TV. That's why I'm so torn on it. That being said, I can completely understand how there are people out there that saw that and were just like, fuck this, I'm not watching this shit. I understand both sides of that argument. I really do. But I think if you're going to hook the audience more and really tell a compelling story, I think something there needs to be progressed. And I think that's in the form of variety, because as much as I love Ray Seahorn, I love her. She is one of my favorite actresses. She did such a good job in this role. And she did a fantastic job as Kim Wexler. I think just having her for the whole time and not really cutting as much to Manusso's until like later in the season, that's kind of a problem. I don't think we're going to have that problem anymore because the two had to meet. And I think also, at the very end of the story, it well-rounded out enough where everything contextually happened for a reason, and I'm glad everything unfolded the way it did. But just to get to episode 9 wasn't exactly the easiest thing. But I'm going to be honest about this. As far as a pro here, that's my biggest, that's a con. That's the whole con, really. It's more of an idiosyncrasy. It's not as much of a con. But I do want to talk about the things that I do think worked that I haven't talked about before. We all know the cinematography is good. We know the actual writing on the page is good. We know the direction is good. That's any Vince Gilligan project. This is top tier. I think this is him at his best in those aspects. So I'm not even going to really talk about those. My biggest pro and the biggest thing that shocked me that I loved, and it's not a thing, it's Carolina Wydra. She was fucking fantastic as Zosha. She actually was my favorite part of this show, so whenever she was on screen, I was instantly hooked. I think part of that is because of the intrigue itself of exploring this hive mind and exploring the joining, but it's also majority of it is through Carolina Wydra's delivery. She did such a fantastic job, and her range as an actress is insane. I don't know how she's not in more projects. She is so fucking good. Like the ending of this season in episode 9, when she goes from being lovey-dovey to Carol to instantly that deadpan turn of emotion where where Carol realizes that Zosha is, and the joining, the people, they are all actively working against her consent to turn her into one of them. Her change from a loving, admirable face to that deadpan, that deserves a fucking Emmy in and of itself. That was fantastic. But it wasn't just that. It was everything with her. I thought she was fantastic. I'd have to imagine that playing Zosha where you have to act very satisfied at all times, very just different than a normal role I got to imagine that is very difficult, but there was never a point where I was like, I felt weird about it or anything like that. Carolina Wydra did a good job. I could praise Ray Seahorn all I want, but I'm not going to do that just because I think she is the fucking GOAT. I think she is one of the greatest actresses ever. So I'm not going to glaze her right now just because it's obvious. She's the best. So I'm going to talk about Carolina Wydra because I think she just absolutely killed it. I'm not just saying that to like bring something up either, just to talk about. I'm saying that because genuinely I was blown away. Whoever was the chemistry coordinator to find Carolina Wydra to work with Ray Seahorn, the casting was literally perfect. I can't think of a better casting for a character. Carolina Wydra as an actress is just incredible. The chemistry was, I think, perfect for casting. And I think my biggest intrigue with the story came through Zosha. Yeah, Manusso's is pretty interesting to me too. And I'm very interested to see where they go together. But man, Zosha just had it for me. I can't wait to see more of her. And that's why at the end of episode 9, when Carol and Zosha split the way they do, I'm kind of upset about that because I love her addition, her prevalence in the story, or presence, I should say, in the story. It just really fucking stands out. She was such a good element. I can't stress it enough. I feel like a broken record, but it is true. That's how much I enjoyed her. Again, Manusso's is really interesting, but it kind of goes back to that variety thing. I liked his introduction, but there's no real threat with him. Yes, he's a threat to the joining people, but like, we're all kind of on Manusso's side, right? We're also kind of all on Carol's side, and now she realizes it again, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm having a very hard time seeing how they're going to give variety in the sense that there's something else. I don't know how to describe that, but yeah. That's how I'm really feeling about this show, man. I noticed my camera's about to die, so I have to go because I don't want to lose this. But guys, I loved this season. I did think it had its idiosyncrasies, but all in all, I would give this a 9.5 out of 10. I really thoroughly enjoyed this season of TV, and I can't wait to see how they improve it in the future. If you agree, let me know in the comments. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear all the discourse. Try to be respectful, though. And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. Merry Christmas, and until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.